Picture a Tennessee dusk, thick with fireflies and fiddle tunes, where the Grayson barn hummed alive every Saturday night. Luke Grayson, 15 and wiry, danced his fingers over a battered harmonica, its wail weaving through the stomps of a barn dance. His dad Henry plucked a banjo beside him, grin wide as the moon, while folks twirled hay-strewn floors. It was their rhythm, sweat, song, and kinship, until a storm brewed fiercer than the thunder outside. That night, the family lingered after the crowd thinned, lanterns flickering over a supper of cornbread and beans. Henry, voice low, spun a tale of a local man run out years back for loving wrong. "Good riddance," he chuckled, but Luke's gut twisted. Those words weren't his dad's tune. Marjorie, his mom, slammed her mug down, eyes flint sharp. "Filthy queers like that are a blight, ought to be ashamed." The barn went still, forks scraping plates the only sound. Luke's harmonica burned in his pocket. He couldn't swallow it anymore. "They're not filth," he snapped, voice cracking like a dry twig. "I'm gay too. Am I a blight?" A thunderclap answered, but Marjorie's roar drowned it. "You what?" she bellowed, chair scraping as she stood. "You sick little stain, shaming us after all we've done." Luke's chest heaved, tears pricking. "I'm not sick, I'm me." Henry froze, banjo limp, but Marjorie lunged, face red as barn paint. "No son of mine's a disgrace, get out." The air choked with rage. She shoved a rucksack at him, Pete's old fishing bag, its thud a gut punch. "Go rot in the rain, don't crawl back." Luke stumbled to the door, harmonica clutched like a lifeline. Rain lashed him as he stepped into the storm, the barn's glow fading behind Marjorie's snarl. Thunder rolled, drowning his sobs. Home wasn't home anymore, just a hollow shell spitting him out into the wet dark. Feel that sting? Tell us when you lost your safe place. Comment, like, share, sub to Heart Stories. The Tennessee rain didn't let up as Luke Grayson stumbled from the barn, his rucksack a sodden weight on his shoulder, 15 and cast out. He clutched his harmonica, Henry's last gift, like it could hum him back home. The storm lashed him raw, boots sinking into the muck of Grayson land, each step a slap of rejection. Marjorie's words, "sick little stain," looped in his skull, a bitter chorus drowning out the thunder. He'd played that barn dance stage 100 times, but now the field stretched cold and endless, a nowhere road swallowing him whole. Luke didn't know where to turn, just that turning back wasn't a tune he'd play. He hit the town's edge, soaked to the bone. Rain blurring the glow of porch lights. The old feed store loomed, a rickety shed folks used for storage, its door ajar like a half-hearted invite. Luke ducked in, shaking off the wet, but a shadow barked from the gloom. "Who's there?" Old Man Carver, grizzled and sour, swung a lantern. "Ain't no motel." "Boy, scram!" Luke's voice cracked. "Just for tonight, please." Carver's lip curled. "Heard about you, Grayson's queer kid. Get lost for I call the preacher." Luke staggered back into the downpour, the shed slam a fresh bruise on his pride. Next stop was Jed's bar, a dive where barn dancers drowned their sore feet in whiskey. Luke slipped in, rain pooling at his boots, but Jed's glare pinned him fast. "No strays here, beat it." A drunk at the counter slurred, "Marjorie says he's filth, don't need that stink." Luke's plea, "I got nowhere," Funny fell flat. Jed shoved him out. The doors bang a cold echo of home. The streets turned meaner then. Word spread fast in this speck of a town. Porches darkened as he passed. Curtains twitched with scorn. Marjorie lit a fuse, and Luke was the trash they'd burn. He trudged to the creek bridge, mud sucking at his heels, when boots crunched behind him. 4 shadows, farmhands, tanked on rotgut, loomed under the bridge's sway. "Well, looky here," one sneered. Breath sour with booze. "Grayson's little freak lost your barn." Luke's gut sank. "Leave me be," he rasped. But they circled, fists itching. A haymaker cracked his jaw. He hit the sludge, harmonica skittering free. "Play us a tune." "Queer," another jeered. Stomping it, metal bent. Notes died. Kicks rained down, mud and blood mixing, till they tired of the sport and staggered off, leaving Luke a crumpled heap alone, broken. but not snuffed out yet. Luke Grayson lay shivering in the Tennessee mud, the creek bridge creaking overhead as rain hammered his bruised ribs. 15. Beaten and hollowed out. He fumbled for his harmonica, Henry's gift, its twisted metal a jagged wound in his palm. The farmhand's boots had faded into the storm, but their jeers, queer freak, rang louder than the thunder. Blood trickled from his split lip, mixing with the grit, and his rucksack sagged like a drowned rat beside him. Luke's world had shrunk to this: a puddle, a busted tune, and a town that spat him out. He'd have curled up and let the cold win. But a shadow loomed, a lantern's glow cutting the dark. Amos, a grizzled blacksmith with hands like iron, towered over him, his beard dripping wet. "Boy, you dead or just dumb?" he rasped, voice rough as a forge bellows. Luke blinked up, too wrecked to answer, but Amos didn't wait, hauled him up by the arm, slinging the rucksack over his own shoulder. "Ain't leaving you to rot," he grunted, dragging Luke through the downpour to his lopsided forge on the town's edge. Inside, heat blasted from the coals, thawing Luke's bones as Amos dumped him on a cot, tossing a rag his way. "Clean that mess off your face. Folks round here got no manners." Luke wiped the blood. Words stuck in his throat, but Amos's steady glare cracked something loose. "They hate me," he choked. Amos snorted. "They hate what they don't get, same as always." Days blurred in that forge. Amos fed him stew, patched his cuts, taught him to swing a hammer till his arms ached. The old man didn't pry, just worked, his silence a balm to Luke's raw edges. But one dusk, rifling through a toolbox for nails, Luke found a leather pouch inside, yellowed pages scrawled with heartbreak. "Marjorie's my sister. Amos wrote years back, and her brother Tom was like me, loved a man. Family ran him off. Mama died grieving him. Marjorie swore she'd never forgive his kind. Now her boys caught the same curse." Luke's breath hitched. His uncle, gay, exiled, and Marjorie's hate rooted in a ghost? The irony burned hotter than the forge. He'd barely processed it when Marjorie stormed in, rain-slicked and wild-eyed, Tessa trailing behind, a wiry 12-year-old with a pout. "Luke, you got to go," Marjorie snapped, voice shrill. "Tessa's a laughingstock at school, freak sister, and they call her. Leave this town." Luke clutched the pouch, jaw tight. "You made this hell, why should I run?" Tessa's sneer cut in. "You're ruining me." Marjorie's eyes welled, but not with guilt, panic. "We can't take it, go." Luke stood, Amos's hammer heavy in his grip. "Tell him about Tom," he said, voice low and steel sharp. "Tell him why you hate me, 'cause your own brother was like me. Clear Tessa's name that way." Marjorie's face twisted, a snarl breaking through. "Never. I'd rather die than air that shame." She grabbed Tessa's arm, storming out, her sobs swallowed by the rain. Luke slumped, Amos's hand landing on his shoulder. "She's drowning in her own poison," the old man muttered. "You're tougher than that." The pouch sat like a live coal. Marjorie's past. Luke's fight, and he knew it wasn't over. She'd rather bury him than face her ghosts. But Luke wasn't running. Not this time. Luke Grayson sat in Amos Tate's forge, the glow of coals casting shadows over the leather pouch in his lap. 15 and forged anew, he'd taken Marjorie's plea, leave town for Tessa, and turned it into steel. Her refusal to face Tom's ghost, her brother cast out for loving a man, burned in him hotter than the smithy's fire. Amos, grizzled and steady, watched him from the anvil. Hammer paused mid-strike. "She's scared of her own shadow," he rasped. "But you ain't gotta dance to her tune." Luke nodded. Jaw tight, Marjorie's poison wouldn't drown him, not when he'd clawed this far from the mud. The town hadn't eased up. Whispers turned to glares, and glares to threats. One night, as Luke hauled coal sacks, a brick crashed through the forge's window. "Freak lover" scrawled on it in red. Amos swept the glass with a grunt. Cowards don't sign their work. But Luke knew who'd swung the hammer. Marjorie's venom had lit a fuse, and her hands weren't clean. Days later, hammering a blade, he caught Tessa's voice outside, shrill with spite. "He's gotta go. Mama, he's ruining me." Then a man's growl, "We'll fix it." Luke peeked. 3 roughnecks, fists like hams, loomed with Marjorie, her eyes darting. She'd hired muscle to torch his refuge, to scare him gone. That dusk, the forge flared, flames licking the walls as the trio struck. Luke bolted awake, smoke stinging his lungs. Amos already at the door with a poker. "Stay low." "Hi," the old man barked, swinging at a shadow. Luke grabbed a hammer, heart pounding, and charged. Metal clanged as he bashed a thug's knee, dropping him with a howl. Amos felled another, but the third lobbed a torch, fire catching the rafters. Shouts rose. Neighbors, roused by the blaze, rushed in with buckets. Luke and Amos fought through the heat, pinning the last man as the roof groaned. Sheriff Dawes rolled up, cuffs snapping. Marjorie's goons sang fast, her name spilling like cheap whiskey. The fallout hit hard. Luke took Amos's pouch to the barn dance fair, a harvest night buzzing with fiddles and lanterns. He climbed the stage, harmonica gone but voice sharp. "Marjorie Grayson hired him to burn me out because I'm gay, like her brother Tom was." Gasps ripped through the crowd. He read Amos's words aloud. "Tom's exile a wound laid bare. She'd rather torch me than face him, her own flesh." Marjorie, in the back, went white, Tessa tugging her sleeve. Then the girl snapped, shrill as a crow, "She hates you 'cause you're like him, ruined us." The barn froze. Marjorie's mask cracked, tears spilling, but no words came. Silence damned her louder than shouts. Luke didn't stop there. He sold his busted harmonica to a fiddler for seed cash, pooling it with Amos's grit to birth Grayson's Echo, a radio rig in a borrowed shed, its signal crackling across Tennessee hills. He spun tunes, Henry's old reels and tales of outcasts like Tom. Like him, voices the town couldn't hush. Folks tuned in, first wary, then hooked. Old-timers nodded. Kids scribbled letters. "I'm not alone." Marjorie's name faded from chatter. Tessa's taunts at school drowned by kids humming Luke's songs. The barn dance fair turned. A once hostile crowd clapped for his airwave defiance. He mailed her one last note. Ink steady. "I don't need your pity, I'm Dad's sound. Not your shame." Marjorie got it under a grey dawn, hands shaking as Tessa sulked nearby, her empire of scorn torched by the boy she'd cast out. Luke's echo wasn't just noise, it was a reckoning, and the town heard it loud. Luke Grayson stood in the Tennessee twilight, the shed-turned radio station glowing soft behind him. At 16, he'd turned ash into airwaves with Grayson's Echo, a crackling lifeline of tunes and truths that drowned out the town's old venom. The harmonica was gone, but his voice rang clear, spinning Henry's reels and tales of outcasts like Tom, weaving a new rhythm for a place that had once spat him out. Barn dances hummed again, but now folks tapped boots to his signal. Old hands who'd shunned him tipped hats. Kids who'd jeered sang along. Luke wasn't just a Grayson anymore. He was the echo that wouldn't fade. Marjorie's world shrank fast. The forge fire she'd sparked had burned her own hands. Her hired thugs fingered her in cuffs, and Tessa's schoolyard rant sealed the coffin. "Mama hates him 'cause he's like Uncle Tom." The girl had shrieked, and the town turned its squint on Marjorie. She'd slunk from the fair, face a mask of ruin, her reign as judge and jury torched by her own kin. Tessa, 12 and sharp-tongued, took heat. Classmates swapped taunts for pity, whispering poor thing as she sulked past. But pity didn't soften her. It honed her glare, a mirror of Marjorie's spite. Luke didn't gloat. He'd won something bigger than revenge. Grayson's echo wasn't just noise, it was a spark. Letters piled in, teens spilling secrets, old-timers confessing regrets. One night, Luke aired Tom's story, how Henry'd hauled him from a barn blaze decades back, only for Marjorie to slam the door on his singed frame. She lost them both. Amos rasped beside him, voice thick. Henry died trying to save him. Damn fool ran back in. Luke's breath caught, his dad. Dead not from a weak heart, but a fierce one, chasing the brother Marjorie'd cursed. The twist cut deep. Henry's last note was mercy, and Luke was its player now. Marjorie showed one dawn, eyes sunken, Tessa trailing like a shadow. "I was wrong," she croaked, voice a husk. "Tom, I killed him with hate. And you—" Luke met her gaze. "Steady. I don't need your tears, I've got my sound." Tessa's lip curled, but Marjorie grabbed her arm. Silent, regret was hers to choke on. Luke didn't forgive. Not yet. But he left the door cracked. Henry'd want that much. Tessa stayed prickly, but her taunts dulled. School kids tuned to Luke's waves instead. The barn danced on, Luke's echo threading through. Marjorie sat alone in her pew, Tessa fidgeting beside her, while the town swayed to a new beat. Amos clapped his shoulder. "Your Henry's song, kid, louder than he ever was." Luke grinned. Harmonica lost, but melody found. A victory not in spite, but in spite of them all. What did you fight to echo? Your truth or their silence? Tell us below, hit like, share, sub to Heart Stories for more.